On June 29, 2017, Joshua Stimpson arrived at Pure Gym in Chatham, Kent, placing his mat next to his ex-girlfriend, Molly McLaren.
The human instinct in you wants to be wrong, and you want to feel as though it is just a coincidence.
Molly, an A-grade student in her second year of university, with a promising career as a fitness instructor and blogger.
Get to the same bit every day. I feel like I'm lagging. Everyone gets that bit. Just got to push through. It is not pretty.
Stimpson, a double glazing salesman from Rochester, with a history of unhealthy relationship breakups that go undetected.
He turned very quickly into this very, very nasty, manipulative character. She was upset every day.
The two would meet through the internet. Stimpson would use his online presence to wage a reign of terror. For 21-year-old Molly McLaren, it's a fresh start. Next week, she starts university and can't wait. Molly is going to study health and fitness at the University of Kent. Like for all young people, uni means hard work, but also new friends, partying, and boys. Freshers Week. After settling in, it's time to explore. Kent University is only 7 miles away from where Molly grew up, but here there are new students from all over the country. In her first lecture, Molly spots a girl looking nervous and goes to speak to her.
We were both on our own, just sort of looking around, sort of that nervous feeling of don't know anyone right now. But there was like this instant connection between us, and we didn't at the time know what that was, but we were just drawn to one another.
Molly's charm means she quickly forms a new group of close friends. They enjoy meeting up and socialising in nearby Chatham. As well as Jennifer, Amelia Davis is part of the group. They all share lectures and a love of exercise.
Molly was very motivating in uni, especially when you were close to her. She really could motivate everyone around her without kind of much trouble. It was kind of just something that came naturally to her, and just always asking funny questions in lectures. All the lecturers say, like, you know, the question she came out with or something she would say is just hilarious, but always just like puts 100% into everything, and that's why she got like amazing grades.
As well as making new friends and partying, Molly throws herself into study.
I think everybody knew Molly right from Freshers Week in terms of she was such a bouncy, lively personality, always full of enthusiasm. So, you know, one of the lecturers that I spoke to described her as the light that came into the room.
Every day she'd walk into lecture, smile and a coffee in her hand, powered by coffee every day.
With your closest friends, it's not always about doing the most exciting things when you're really close to someone. So for us, it was going to the gym together. We'd always have a laugh every time I went with her. And that's why I loved going with her, because she always made it fun.
As Molly's friends get to know her, they discover her outgoing, lively personality. Something one of her close friends knew well. Molly and Amy grew inseparable when they worked together at Ted Baker in Dartford.
My first impressions of Molly was how beautiful she was. We never really saw her without a smile on her face. She was the joker of the pack, shall we say. She always brightened up your day. If you were down in the dumps or if you were having a tough time with a customer, she'd be the first person to come up to you and kind of make a joke out of it and make it all okay again.
For students, dating is priority number one, but Molly is looking for something deeper.
Molly's dating history was, she never really had a lot of boyfriends. She was quite passionate about finding the right person, and for her it wasn't about being in a relationship because everyone else was or because she felt like she should be. It was very much about connecting with somebody on a personal level.
The tight-knit group of friends live their lives online, uploading their daily activities to apps like Snapchat, Instagram and Facebook. Molly goes even further and starts her own fitness blog.
She was really, really into her high-intensity training in the gym. She used to love HIIT circuits and stuff like that, always posting videos of her little gym workouts.
Get to the same bit every day. I feel like I'm lagging. Everyone gets that bit. Just got to push through. It is not pretty.
When Molly was in university, she started writing her blog, and a lot of people read it. And I read all her posts and was sharing them because they were just so motivational. And she just seemed to overcome kind of every barrier she came to. Even with things like hard university work, she would always overcome it and do so well at it and get a really good grade.
But behind her good grades and busy social life, Molly is hiding her own personal problems.
At the time, I had no idea that Molly had battled her own sort of mental health issues with eating disorders, as had I done. And I don't know what it is, but when you have had those issues, there is something that draws you to a person. You don't even have to know, but you've just got to look at each other and there's this connection.
Molly and Amy had been working together for a while at Ted Baker before Molly opened up.
It wasn't until later on when we really developed our relationship that I realised that she had quite a lot of struggles in the background and that she'd actually been suffering with bulimia nearly the entire time that I knew her. Every day she would have to make conscious decisions to stay on track and not allow this disorder to take over her. And she was really good about it. Everyone has bad days, but she was honest. You know, I'm having a bad day. Everyone has a bad day, but this isn't the end.
Molly would always say to me, just find one good thing about every day and your thoughts will shift, your mindset will shift. And she was just so right.
Despite issues that have plagued Molly for years, university is helping her to find direction and purpose. But there's one element of her life still missing: a serious relationship. Molly's first year at university has come to an end. Exams are over, it's the summer. It's been a warm, sunny week, and to make things better, Molly has had a match on dating app Tinder.
Molly met him online through a dating app, and they spoke for quite some time.
Her Tinder match is 24-year-old Joshua Stimpson. He lives just 9 miles away from Molly in the village of Woden in Kent. Molly sends her first message to him in late July, and after a few months of online chatting, they finally meet up.
I remember hearing a few times that she'd met someone and that she seemed to be getting on really well, and they'd been out on a couple of dates.
It was just any, normal relationship. They were just chatting. After a while, they started to meet up. And then eventually form into a relationship. And I was happy for her because, of course, I'm going to be happy for someone who seemed happy at the time, yeah.
As the weeks pass, Molly and Joshua Stimpson spend more and more time together. Meals out, nights drinking, and a shared love of exercise. For Molly, this is her first serious relationship. A person she can open up to and share secrets with.
They realised that they had what seemed to be quite a lot in common in sense of kind of the anxiety and their struggles that they'd been through. He'd said to Molly that he'd also struggled with anxiety and depression, and they kind of connected on that level, and she almost felt as though she needed to help him through his situation, and he in turn was helping her.
Stimpson was raised mainly by his father after his parents divorced and his mother moved to Stoke-on-Trent. During childhood, he'd been treated for depression. But what Molly and her friends don't realise is that there's far more to Stimpson's past than he's letting on.
She said that she had a bit in common because the person she'd met had said that he'd had some mental health issues himself, and she said so they could sort of help each other, lift each other up. So at the time I was like, oh, this is really positive for you, Molly. I'm like so glad that you found someone who you can relate to and that you seem really happy.
They were kind of partners in this dark place that could help each other to see the light on their bad days.
£3,000. Hundreds of thousands of people have been celebrating the start of 2017 at events across the UK.
After Christmas and New Year, Molly's back at university. She's now been dating Joshua Stimpson for a few months and decides it's time to introduce him to her friend Amelia. Together they go to a gym session in Chatham, but Stimpson's behaviour puts Amelia on edge.
When I met him, he wasn't overly chatty, and obviously I was always going to be welcoming because that's my friend's boyfriend. I made a joke about something, and after me and Molly left, he was messaging her later, trying to get in between me and Molly. So that shocked me a lot, and it instantly put me off.
Molly and her friends think they know the real Joshua Stimpson, but they would soon discover his true character. 22-year-old Molly McLaren has been in a relationship for 4 months with Joshua Stimpson after meeting him on Tinder. But Stimpson is hiding a dark side. He has a dangerous history with ex-girlfriends. Molly's friends are now noticing changes in his behaviour.
If she wanted to have a day of studying, he would tell her that, you know, he needed to be there for her, and was very manipulative in his approach for them to spend time together. He would often turn up unannounced at her house.
Molly begins to feel she needs more space in the relationship. She texts him. Stimpson doesn't respond well. Conversations between them take a turn for the worse. Molly confides in her friend Amelia.
I mean, I've never been spoken to like that, and it surprised me that, you know, he was kind of saying those things and not saying sorry for them. She was still herself and she was very resilient, but at the same time there was, you know, a lot of moments where he would bring her down emotionally, or she would just feel really down in herself because she thought she was in the wrong because he made her feel like that.
I think that's when the cracks started to show that a lot of this wasn't sincere, that it was all quite manipulative, and it had an end goal, and that was to completely isolate her from her friends.
As winter turns to spring, Stimpson's controlling and manipulative behaviour continues.
She felt suffocated, and imagine being stuck within an eating disorder for that amount of years and feeling as though you have no control, finally breaking free of that and then having a person try to control you. It wasn't what she wanted.
Molly has had enough and decides to end the relationship. But Stimpson won't accept it and bombards her with a series of messages pleading for them to get back together. What Molly doesn't know is that when previous girlfriends have broken up with him, Stimpson has displayed violent and threatening behaviour, including spitting in an ex-girlfriend's face. He also slashed the tyres of another and threatened to drown her. But a few weeks after Molly breaks up with him, against the advice of her friends, she takes him back.
I advised her not to, but I think she was just so caught up in guilt because he had made her feel like that.
But as soon as they get back together, Stimpson picks up right where he left off.
He would invite himself out on group nights out that she hadn't invited him to. So, for example, she would go to a gig and he would say, oh, cool, what time are we leaving? Or who else is coming? So it was almost without being invited. So I think, again, that was a flag that really he didn't want her to have any alone time with her friends. And that, for me, isn't really something that I thought was okay.
Do you know what? It's the 1st of May. Is it? The darling buds of May. It's May, the lusty month of May.
In a last-ditch attempt to save the relationship, Molly decides to go on holiday to Tenerife with Stimpson.
She wanted to see how the holiday went. Maybe some time just the two of them would make her feel slightly differently about the situation.
But things don't go well, and Molly reaches out to her friends back home.
The holiday went not too great, and she texted me while she was on holiday, and she said they really weren't getting along. I was very worried because she was just out there with him.
She'd said that he just wasn't listening. He just wasn't taking on board anything that she was saying. When she came home, she was set on breaking up with him.
Radio till 10 p.m. tonight. And let's start, because you need to go on.
It's a busy Saturday night in the centre of Maidstone. Molly is out celebrating her 23rd birthday with friends. Although she's been arguing with Stimpson over Facebook Messenger for days, they're still a couple.
He'd come along, and I think the evening was going okay. And then they'd had a little bit of an argument, and she'd just kind of snapped. I think she just ultimately had enough. And she'd just said she doesn't want to be with him anymore. And yeah, she broke up with him in the nightclub, and he'd become quite aggressive.
Stimpson shouts, "She's finished with me," in front of all their friends.
And I think that was the first time any of her friends had seen any side of him that wasn't just the norm. And then after that, they'd argued quite a lot, and she'd ended up blocking him on social media and any kind of communication platforms.
But for Molly, her family and her friends, a cold and calculated nightmare would now begin. Stimpson starts by attacking her on Facebook.
He'd then started to post malicious content on Facebook that she was then made aware of, because other friends of Molly's still had Stimpson as a contact on Facebook, so she was able to see what he was posting. He'd tried to publicly humiliate her by disclosing information and tagging her family in it so that they would see some of the messages that she'd sent and things that she'd been up to with her friends. So again, it was more about this return of public humiliation that clearly he held her responsible for.
Molly had spent a lot of time creating an online image based around healthy living and fitness.
Everyone gets that bit. Just got to push through. It is not pretty.
Stimpson tries to ruin this, posting that Molly is using cocaine. He tags her family in the posts so they can see them. Molly is distraught.
I saw some of the online abuse. She sent me screenshots of them in a text conversation we were having. And this was the time that we weren't at uni together. But I knew she had people around her, she had her family, she had her friends, and I was really thankful for that. But it was definitely hard because I wanted to be there for her. And I was also so relieved because I thought that was going to be the end of it and he was going to leave her alone.
Molly's Facebook friends block Stimpson, so he continues his abuse on WhatsApp. She becomes terrified he will turn up at her house and messages family and friends. But then Stimpson posts one particularly chilling message online. Molly now feels like she has to do something. She screenshots and prints out Stimpson's abuse.
And that's when she sought advice from her mum, and they decided to go down to the police station and report the behaviour and get some advice on how to get it removed. And it was quite chilling because the police officer at the time had decided that the best course of action would be to phone him and ask him to take the content down.
The officer rings Stimpson and places the phone on speaker. Molly and her mother can hear everything that he says.
The police officer had said to Stimpson, you know, we're not going to have to talk about this again, are we?
Stimpson simply replies, "Aren't we?"
You know, he actually replied with a very arrogant statement and thought he was untouchable.
Molly immediately texts her friend Amy.
Molly had sent me a message just saying that it was just so cold, that there was just no emotion in the conversation at all, and it had frightened her quite a lot.
He turned very quickly into this very, very nasty, manipulative character, even more than when they were in a relation. I thought he was manipulative when they were together. So when all of that started happening, it was nasty. She was upset every day.
It definitely worried her mum, and they'd printed out pictures of Stimpson and handed them out to neighbours so that they could all kind of keep a lookout for him.
Stimpson goes to work, but leaves early. He drives to Asda in Chatham. Here, he buys a Sabatier paring knife. Later that day, he also buys a pickaxe. That evening, the police call Molly. They tell her that Stimpson has agreed to take down his abusive media posts. All of her friends have now blocked Stimpson. But he is one step ahead. He's manipulated another girl into friending Molly on social media.
He'd managed to gain access to her whereabouts and what she was doing and what she was posting through another individual who had offered to feed back all of her movements to him. Somebody that ultimately wanted to harm her and now had access to where she was and who she was with and what she was doing.
Molly's getting ready for a night out with her friends. She's heading out to a bar in Chatham Docks. She posts where she's going on Facebook. But she has no idea that by doing this, she's letting Stimpson know exactly where she's going to be.
We were in the pub and we were celebrating her enrolment on her PT course. One of our other friends had been promoted, so we decided to go for dinner and have a few drinks.
Suddenly, the evening takes a dramatic turn. Stimpson shows up out of the blue.
He turned up to the bar that we were at with another girl. You know, we sat there and said, oh, how strange. What are the odds? That, you know, maybe he was trying to stay out of your way. But actually, she'd posted a picture of where she was that afternoon, of where she was going when she was getting ready, and then, you know, he turned up. Just what a shame that you'd had to be here to witness him going on another date. And actually, she'd said to us, I'm actually not jealous, and that's how I know I don't love him anymore. So for her, that was confirmation that she'd absolutely made the right decision.
Molly had been trying to put Stimpson out of her mind, but he has other ideas.
Molly had gone to the bar to find out where to pay for her parking, and he'd been at the bar at the same time and smiled at her.
Molly can't believe what's happening. She and her friends can't work out if this is pure coincidence or something more sinister. Stimpson continues to make the girls feel on edge.
He walked past the table probably 20 minutes before we decided to leave, and we just said, oh, how childish. There's more than one exit out of the pub, and he didn't need to walk past our table. After we'd finished eating dinner, Molly had said she needed to leave because she needed to make it home for Love Island. So a few of us had stayed to have an extra drink, and she'd left. Nobody escorted her to her car. No one was worried that he might follow her. Nobody even batted an eyelid.
Molly says goodnight to her friends. She just wants to get home. She thinks she's all alone. "23-year-old Molly McLaren is enjoying a night out with friends. However, the night has unfortunately turned sour. Her ex-boyfriend Joshua Stimpson has somehow found out where she's drinking and has turned up, unnerving Molly and her friends.
I remember seeing an Instagram post where she took a picture in the toilets and it said, that feeling when your ex shows up at the same club as you. And so I instantly knew that she was sort of a bit uneasy because she was obviously out with her friends and he's turned up and she's already been threatened at the time and reported him to the police.
Molly says goodnight to her friends and heads to the car park.
I just sent a message saying, hey, I really hope you're okay, stay away and just make sure you're safe.
She has no idea she's being stalked. The next day, Molly McLaren wakes up early at her home in Cobham, Kent. She gets dressed, leaves the house, and gets into her car. She drives to her gym in Chatham. She wants to record another fitness blog and post it online. Molly is unaware that she's being followed by Joshua Stimpson. Molly arrives at the gym just before 10 a.m. Shortly after, Stimpson enters the car park.
We'd been chatting in the morning and I'd just said to her, you know, don't worry about him. You know that you've made the right decision, and she was feeling good.
As it's early in the morning, the gym is eerily quiet. Molly has the place virtually to herself. She happily works out, oblivious that Stimpson has followed her again, the second time in 24 hours. He walks into the gym and climbs the stairs. He seems to change his mind and go back down. But he turns back. Molly is startled from her workout. She stares at him, wondering why he's there. She sends Amy a text and photo of Stimpson.
And I'd said to her, I don't think that's right. First of all, he'd turned up at dinner last night. Now he's at the gym.
Molly then works up the courage to talk to him.
She'd said to him, why aren't you at work? And he'd just replied saying, well, I don't think that's any of your business.
Molly's terrified that he's somehow again in exactly the same place as her.
The human instinct in you wants to be wrong, and you want to feel as though it is just a coincidence.
Amy is really worried. Together they try to work out how Stimpson knew Molly was there.
Did you post anywhere that you were going to the gym, was my first reaction. She'd said that she hadn't put anything on Facebook or Instagram, that she was filming stuff for uni. No one could have known she was there.
But suddenly, Stimpson leaves. Molly is now completely alone and unsure what to do next. She texts Amy.
I'd said to her, maybe you should just leave, just take yourself out of the situation. She'd phoned her mum and told her mum what was going on. And her mum had given her the same advice as well, which was to leave, to go straight home. And he'd been driving around the car park waiting for her to leave.
Molly gets her belongings together and texts Amy again.
And I'd replied to her saying, don't speak to him, just get out. Something's not right, just leave. And she said, I'm walking to my car now. And I'd replied to her saying, don't worry about him, he's a psycho.
As Molly gets to her car, she's unaware that Stimpson is in the car park.
She'd read the message and never replied. I assumed that she was driving home.
"23-year-old Molly McLaren is being stalked by her ex-boyfriend Joshua Stimpson. He's been harassing her and she's reported him to the police. But terrifyingly, over the last 24 hours, he's followed her to 2 separate locations. First, a night out with friends, and then to the gym, placing his mat right next to her. Molly is so frightened, she texts her mum and friend Amy to ask what she should do.
And I'd replied to her saying, don't worry about him, he's a psycho.
Stimpson leaves the gym, and Molly hopes he's left her alone. But he's lying in wait for her outside.
He'd been driving around the car park waiting for her to leave.
Just after 11 a.m, Molly gets to her car and is completely unaware that Stimpson is watching her every move.
If she'd been scared, maybe she wouldn't have left alone. Maybe if we told her to stay there and not leave, that he would have got bored and maybe driven away.
Before Molly has a chance to leave, Stimpson crosses the car park and jumps into the car. At 11:08 a.m, he viciously attacks Molly McLaren, stabbing her 75 times.
I'd received a message from one of my friends at work to say, you know, have you seen what's happened at Dockside? And I'd gone online and I'd had a look, and I thought, gosh, that's really, really horrific. And never for a second did I think that it was her. And I tried to ring her and I tried to text her and she didn't answer. And that's when I thought, God, I've got a really, really horrible feeling. And it just wasn't real. It will never be real.
Get to the same bit every day. I feel like I'm lagging. Everyone gets that bit. Just got to push through. It is not pretty.
I wasn't really thinking. It was just like shock. Yeah.
It was just the worst night of my life ever. I didn't sleep that night. I just cried all night. I just could not comprehend any of it at all.
It's not something I believed myself for ages. Like, every morning I would wake up for a while after that and think, oh, that's not real.
The victim of the attack yesterday at the Dockside Shopping Centre has been named as 23-year-old Kent University student Molly McLaren from Cobham near Gravesend. Now, Joshua Stimpson from near Rochester has been charged with murder and appeared before magistrates in Medway earlier.
Stimpson's trial for the murder of Molly McLaren began on the 23rd of January 2018 at Maidstone Crown Court. He makes a plea for manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility.
It was just a really horrible time, because you just think to yourself, how could he possibly walk away with this, with manslaughter? I just don't know how we're all going to live with that.
At the trial, it's revealed Stimpson has a history of stalking other women.
So in court, it was quite difficult to listen to some of Stimpson's previous encounters with women. He was known to the police for threatening behaviour. He'd sent messages to one of the girls saying that he would fly to where she was on holiday and drown her. He'd been suspected of slashing her tyres outside her house. He'd also had another encounter with a local girl around turning up at her flat unannounced and being in the same nightclubs that she was in and waiting outside for her, and he'd also spat in her face in a nightclub.
The jury take less than 4 hours to return a unanimous verdict. They convict Joshua Stimpson of murder, and he's sentenced to life in prison without parole. The judge said during sentencing that Stimpson was a highly dangerous young man who would pose a very considerable risk to women in the future. Five months later, Rochester Cathedral hosts the graduation ceremony for Molly McLaren's university year. The main hall is packed, and there are 2 guests of honour in the audience: Molly's parents.
Most Honourable Chancellor, it is with great sadness that I now invite Doug and Joanne McLaren to accept the award of undergraduate diploma in Sports and Exercise for Health, awarded posthumously to Molly McLaren.
He gives them the certificate, speaks to them, and it's at that stage after that everybody gets the nod. And at the same point, Gavin turned Joe and Doug towards the congregation so they could hear and see this celebration.
It was just like I was cheering for her as though she was getting her certificate, because I would have cheered so loudly because I've been so proud of her.
The students, the staff, everyone in that cathedral lifted the roof. We were cheering, we were whooping, and yeah, we were really, really remembering Molly.
Everyone felt very honoured that, you know, Joe and Doug managed to be there. That was incredibly strong of them, and every parent should feel like they can go to that ceremony because she would have still been there and she would have done amazing.
Since Molly's death, friends and family have set up a charity for people suffering with eating disorders called the Molly McLaren Foundation.
There's one thing I've learnt from her relationship and their situation is that there are red flags as you go along, but unless you really sit and evaluate them as a whole, they don't look like red flags, and that's probably one of the most upsetting things.
The rise of social media and the internet has meant that stalkers have found a new way to track and target their prey.
I don't think there's enough awareness about it at all, because before this happened to Molly, quite honestly, I was completely unaware of it. Maybe someone may bring it up in a conversation, but I wouldn't draw any attention to it at all. You never think it would happen to you, or it's never happened to me, I don't really understand it. Who would do anything like that?
I think in the modern day, it's still very new. It's not something that people have had a chance to really look into. And it's more scary than anything. Many people that post where they are, when they're there, the introduction of live videos, Snapchat being in the moment. You don't necessarily know who's watching. And yes, you can control your friends list and you can control who is viewing your things on Instagram, but do you really know those people?
It has really impacted me with dating. I'm sure there will be a time where I will meet someone and I will be okay and maybe have a nice relationship, but at the moment I'm just always on edge when I'm doing things like that, especially when someone contacts me on social media.
Molly and her friends unwittingly fell into the world of a psychotic stalker, partly because of their generation's dependence on online life.
A lot of this cyber stalking can lead to things like, death and serious injuries. And I don't know what's more serious than that, to be honest.
In the UK, at least 2 women a week are murdered at the hands of partners or ex-partners. Stalking-related behaviour is identified in 94% of these cases. The tight-knit community of Cobham are standing strong. Every year they celebrate Molly's birthday by hosting a charity festival called Molly Fest.
Her story resonated with so many people. She was so young, and everyone has a best friend, everyone has a daughter, everyone has, a cousin, and it was really important for us to have her remembered for who she was and what she stood for, and not what happened to her.
Some days it's easier than others, and I do shed a tear most days, but I talk to Molly every day, and I love watching videos of Molly.
We just all, had to believe what had happened and just move on from it and do the best that you can and take every day as it comes.